Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, we're hitting the hardwood to look back to Fort Worth, look ahead to the Jayhawks coming to Lubbock, and thoughts from Steve Green, Pop Isaacs, Mark Adams on all of the above. Next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be back with you once again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network 2023 edition. Kicking the door open with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Great to be with you on YouTube, anywhere you get podcasts, worldwide, intergalactically even. Bringing you this episode here today, LinkedIn Jobs, and they're helping you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post that job for free with LinkedIn Jobs. Terms and conditions apply. And Chris, as we kick open a new year, we hit the ground running because we are already off and running within Big 12 play for Mark Adams and the Red Raiders. We'll have a look back to Fort Worth, a look ahead to the Jayhawks coming to Lubbock. But first, I want to take a look at what was an interesting trio of guys that you had a chance to visit with on the Mark Adams radio show locally in Lubbock. Coach Adams, Pop Isaacs, Steve Green. I mean, there's a heavy load and some heavy hitters we're talking about there, but great to be back with you, man. Happy New Year. And I'm sure that you're feeling the burn as we are now within the Big 12 grind.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, last night spent some time with Coach Adams, as you mentioned, and obviously you're a guy that we're seeing kind of really come into his own, and he just so impressive. Even the January 3rd version of Pop Isaacs compared to what we saw in early November are vastly different players, and then obviously Coach Green, who's got the scout for the game tonight against Kansas, and obviously he's been a guy that's won national championships around West Texas at South Plains at the junior college level, and has known Coach Adams for a long time since he was back at Clarendon College. But yeah, I mean, so yeah, we ran the gamut. I mean, we looked back, we looked ahead, we kind of took some stock about where this program was, and but this is, as you mentioned, man, the burn, the grind, and all that's here. But we talked about this. We could see it coming. You knew once it started, but you're going to look up and it's going to be mid-March. There's going to be a lot of stressful moments between now and then for sure, as you're trying to get a young team to grow up rather quickly.
Yeah, and that comes with all kinds of opportunity as well. You were just on the road against a top 25 opponent. Anytime you got the Jayhawks coming to town, you got big-time opportunity. You've probably seen some of the various metrics and how they reflect upon the Big 12 conference. I saw some national strength of schedule remaining rankings. So what teams have left on their schedule as the dust has settled to this point in the year, and the top 10 schedules filled by Big 12 members. These are Big 12 members only that nationally have the top 10 toughest remaining schedules. Gives you an idea of how folks are viewing the conference, and you were in a bit of that kind of environment, obviously on the road against the Horned Frogs, Chris. But I know that as we've talked about all along, it's going to be a work in progress for Mark Adams. There was some hope or wish, I guess, that maybe before the new year you were really coming into place and looking like some of the best of what you can look like as a basketball team. That clearly is not the case, and some of that out of your control, when it comes to injuries and things like that. But what's your gauge for maybe where Coach Adams possibly feels like they are within that process? Are they behind where he thought he'd be? What's your read there?
Yeah. By the way, while I was mentioning who I was with last night, I had somebody tell me to tell you hello, a guy that you've known for a long time, and Rick Cooper.
Oh, Coach Cooper, all-timer, legendary, panhandle hero.
Yep, he is one good human, man, and Texas Tech lucky to have him around. Yeah, you have Steve Green and Rick Cooper and Mark Adams, just some guys that have been around the basketball scene here around this part of the state for a long
Cooper
time.
puts on a hell of a basketball camp. Let me tell you, as someone who, via his father's relationship with Coach Cooper, gained free entry to these camps. So I was kind of like a secret shopper because it wasn't my money on the line. You know, I could really be honest. And it's a hell of an operation. Although I did kind of, I don't know, year after year, hearing the opening night speech, you know, and the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. I'm like, all right, first time I'm buying it. First year I went on the campus of Wayland Baptist University. I'm like, you're right, coach. You're absolutely right. Well, second year I go, and maybe up in Canyon at West Texas A&M, I don't know. Well, the journey of 1,000 miles is still beginning with the first step. And I really never advanced to the speech where you say, all right, guys, on to step 2. That's been my only question. I don't know how to advance within that Cooper methodology, but I know some folks know because he's had a lot of success. And that's part of, personally, Chris, as a Tech fan, I think a lot of folks who grew up around here can relate to this if you're a Tech fan. Has been fun to root for, kind of this collection of guys who have mostly put on for the Panhandle during their tenures.
I'll tell you, because here was I've heard Mark give this kind of speech in a different setting, and when I was with him last night, so you remembered something that Coach Cooper had said, and it obviously stuck with you because you rattled that bad boy off. Mark, somebody asked him last night about how do you deal with adversity with your team? How do you talk about it? How do you handle it? Because that's all sports are for the most part. It's just you move these pieces around a field or a court or whatever, and then you just deal with things that come at you in adversity. Rarely does it just go smoothly and all that. That's the beauty of sports and coaching, is that that's your job, is to handle all the moving parts. And one of the things that Mark has often leaned on is, and I've heard him talk about it in a different setting, but it's a tennis analogy, and Mark plays a lot of tennis, and it's an acronym, and it's EAR. And I heard it the first time, and I wrote it down and everything, and I'll get to what it stands for in a second. But it was like he rattled that off tonight and explained to the female that was in the audience, you know, that's just what we do it. But it's a tennis analogy. It's an individual sport, but it's expect, accept, and reset, which is EAR. Expect. So the point is, and you mentioned, because the journey, the first step of 1,000 or something. What was the
boom? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
First step. Yeah, there you go. And so his deal is what he was saying there is that, because you asked me a second ago, where does he think he is with his team and their maturation process? But expect things to go poorly, accept that it will go poorly, and reset is essentially, or adversity, not necessarily that will go poorly. Expect that something bad is going to happen, accept it, and then reset and like get your mind right. Like, hey man, I know it's not all going to go smooth. Just like it, professional segue here, just like it went on Tuesday. I mean, on this past Saturday versus TCU, they likely knew that something was going to hit them via the turnover, missed free throws. How did you handle it? Were you able to obviously push through? The answer was no, and it's tricky because I know, having been around it, you tell those kids and you tell your team, if you're a coach, 1,000,000 times. You can write it down. You can, text it to them. You can talk to them. You can
take a picture. I don't give a.
Yeah, you can put it on a scouting report. The Big 12 is going to be hard. These are the things that you must do in order to win. And so, but at some point, you just kind of have to really experience it for yourself, and that's what we're beginning that journey now. Is that you can tell them till you're blue in the face, man. But I can't explain why Davion Harmon or Kevin O'Banner missed 4 free throws, like what technical fouls are called, and you go 0 for 4 at the stripe whenever there's technical fouls that were called on TCU. Those are two of your oldest players, and one of them is your very best free throw shooter. It's just, but welcome to the Big 12. Things are tougher. You have a little more pressure and all that stuff. But you got to figure out a way to kind of grow up in a hurry, because it doesn't get any easier tonight, man. You may be playing the best team in the country.
I once knew a man that was blue in the face all the time. I think his entire body was blue. He was just a blue man, not figuratively. I mean, literally, I think his name was Dr. or Mr. Smotherman, either a superintendent or a preacher in beautiful white face, Texas, America. Would love for someone to fact check that in the YouTube comments, possibly. And I think, from a football perspective, I always really felt this way, and I guess you could apply it anywhere, Chris. When it comes to adversity from game to game or week to week, it's going to always be there, as you were describing. But there are two other aspects. How much are you creating for yourself? How are you dealing with that at the end of the day? And you would think you're going to require some leadership in order to really check those boxes in a positive way, because every team in America, no matter how good, bad, young, old, whatever, is going to experience exactly that when it comes to adversity each and every game. And the other guy that you were visiting with on the air, Chris, I've been kind of interested in how quickly he's become someone that I think a lot of fans look to, and maybe teammates are looking to him as well now on the floor for some of that type of leadership. Pop Isaacs is who we're talking about. I used to ask myself, what does it say about the team that a guy that is as young as he is coming in and doing this? I'm not asking myself anymore because I don't care, because he's doing it. I'm just having fun watching it, Chris. What was it like to visit with Pop Isaacs?
Well, yeah, he's a dude, man. I mean, you're starting to watch. I mean, I again, he's going to have some rough times. There's going to be teams that scout him and play his strengths and attack him differently, and not let him do what he's been able to do as it gets just much tougher. But this is a young man. I mean, you go back to Saturday versus the Frogs, man, and he hits 5 threes. He just doesn't. There's some things that I would say about young players, and these are some of the best compliments you can really give a guy. It doesn't look too big for him. He is a calming influence. I think that he is somebody that if you just watch him play, you just don't – there's nothing about him that says freshman to me. Now, he can have some moments where, maybe he didn't take care of the ball as well as you'd like, but he's just got such a tough-minded mindset about – him. And the most impressive thing is something he told me last night. He's like, it's just basketball. I've played in big games before in high school. I've been around, big time basketball players before growing up and all that. So he doesn't get caught up into whereas other guys are like, oh my gosh, I have to remember this, or look at how many people are in the stands, or I'm playing this team and this coach is on the other sideline. Like, oh my God, this is a lot. He just is like, man, where's the ball? Let's roll. That's just kind of how, and you can sense right. That. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and I think that he's kind of growing up and so all the things that I described there's nothing about that says true freshman. And that's why you're like, you just forget calling him that because it's like, he's one of your starters now. He's one of your better players. Yeah. And I think that the best thing too that I can say about him is that this is a far different player right now than he was in early November. I mean, 2 months later, he's the game started to slow down a little bit. He's doing a better job with some things. He's gotten better. He looks more comfortable. I think that he's going to be a big reason why you have any kind of success in the Big 12 Conference this year.
I'm happy to see him pull the trigger in late game situations, late in the shot clock situations, whatever. He's just in the fold in that way already. And yeah, it kind of speaks to maybe what is possible still left in this season for Pop Isaacs, as you talk about a guy who's finding ways to play better basketball. And I like the gusto as far as saying it's just basketball, but has it ever been just basketball with the Kansas Jayhawks on the other bench? We're about to find out what that looks like. And I can't wait to see whenever the lights are really bright in the Big 12 as they began to be over the weekend. And coming up next, we're going to take a quick trip back to Fort Worth. We'll talk about what went down with the people in purple before we get back to that big-time opportunity that's up next with Bill Self and the Kansas dollar bill Jayhawks coming to town. And looking over the roster, this is one of the more unmemorable rosters that there's nobody here that really I don't think deserves any extra attention. I'll fact check that during the commercial break. Timeout. We'll get to it coming up on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. 2023 is here. And if you're a small business owner, hiring manager, you know that success all depends on the team you assemble for your business. So that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. You get to those qualified candidates the quickest with LinkedIn Jobs. Go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post, company, and their 875 million member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified and ideal candidates that are right for your business. LinkedIn Jobs will help you find those qualified candidates the faster than anybody in the nation. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free today with LinkedIn Jobs. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Great to be your first listen each weekday on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. We hope you'll make Locked On Sports Today your second listen, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts on the Locked On Podcast Network. That is Locked On Sports Today. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Very quickly, we're talking about the other day. Well, Saturday, a Big 12 opener, so it came with some extra excitement, extra vibes, as they might say, Chris. I don't think there's any way around that. You know, you get to conference play, and you're playing in the best conference in the country. So there's a little bit different tingle to that kind of action, I would have to imagine. And even though at the end of it, it wasn't the result we wanted, man, I got to tell you, I was really happy with the response we got when the ball went in the air. And even though it wasn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination, Texas Tech was competing on the road with a top 20 team and doing well as it pertains to those first 20 minutes.
Yeah, you know, there was a lot to, I guess, like from that game Saturday. There was a lot to be frustrated about. I think if you just focus on the frustrating parts, it's going to drive you crazy. Because missed free throws are going to happen. Look, they practice them. It's maddening when you go 50% from the free throw line. You know that you cannot do this and expect to win, especially on the road. The turnovers, you know that you can't turn it over 23 times and expect to win, especially on the road or at home. Doesn't really matter. It's like the Red Raiders versus Baylor back when Pat Mahomes was being honored. And it's like, hey, man, you turn it over 5 times. What do you think is going to happen? You know, that's just kind of the way it goes. But the crazy thing is that I did think it was a game you could possibly steal before it even started. I wasn't sure what the environment was going to be like. But the fact that you really didn't have much of your starting center in Daniel Baccio because he was sick. They weren't even sure he was going to play. You know, Coach Adams mentioned to me last night that, you know, hey, man, we weren't even positive until we really got in the locker room before the game that he was going to for sure try to give it a go. And then he basically asked to start, to which we said, sure. And then Coach Adams is like, and after the game is over and, you know, we're all frustrated because we lost all that, he comes up and tells me thanks. And tells me, you know, how much he appreciated me letting him play. And I'm like, Adams goes, no, Daniel, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because he gave you 5 block shots. He rebounded it well. And, you know, he's just one of those guys right now without Fardaws. You just don't have really any kind of backup for a guy like Baccio. But you factor in that. You factor in that Kevin O'Banner, I think there's 18:36 left in the first half. He's already got 2 fouls. Okay, to which, you know, as you can expect, there's not a lot of time left for him on the floor in that first half. Okay, you just can't chance picking up a 3rd foul in the first half. I think they try to sneak him in for a couple of spurts, but it totally takes you out of your rhythm. You can't even get going because you're not even allowed to start, if that makes sense. So you can't get into the flow of the game, and he just, you know, so with all that though, you're up 11 at half. You know, that's the part that I think you could feel really good about. Is KJ Allen showed up and I thought he played well. He gave you, I think, 9 and 5 in this game. I think I'm right there. But he kind of gave you some of the points that Kevin O'Banner was not able to give you. He wasn't perfect, but I'll tell you the other thing too, Casey, before we move on, is that you started to see the rotation shrink a bit, you know, and this is what's going to happen. No Elijah Fisher and no DeMarion Williams and barely a little bit of Kerwin Walton, who did hit a big 3 there in the first half, if memory serves. But But this is kind of you start to see it kind of wind down a little bit. And Lamar Washington's clearly gotten the nod. Robert Jennings to this point's gotten the nod, and certainly KJ Allen. So there's just not a very deep bench, and you're not exactly sure who's going to get the nod and where those reserve minutes are going to come from. But you clearly know who your five best are, and they played the bulk of the minutes on that day. But yeah, it just wasn't enough. Tried to steal one on the road, but it just doesn't get any easier with the Jayhawks rolling into Lubbock early this week, or tonight, I should say.
I got to be honest with you. I wasn't all that upset to see the game play out the way it did, as far as like the tempo, the point total, and kind of the just black and blue nature of it. Because with Texas Tech working with not only some young guys, but newcomers to the program, maybe to the Big 12 conference, or a returner to the Big 12 in the case of Davion Harmon. I guess he doesn't need any kind of wake up call. He knows what it's like here. But I'm glad that right out of the gates, Chris, on the road, you get in this type of basketball game and you understand just how thin the margin is for error, even when you do have a little cushion, a little padding heading into the second half, because you did some things that against type should have you out of a game, but you were still overcoming and were within a game. I mean, you're thinking about O'Banner, you're thinking about Harmon, thinking about the turnover number, the free throw line number, whatever it was. So we'll find out as the season progresses, I guess, or maybe coming up next for these two teams, if that's more indicative of something concerning for Texas Christian. Is it more encouraging as far as something for Texas Tech? I don't know which one maybe is closer to reality.
Well, Coach Green said something I thought was really interesting. This is the way he looked at it. He said, he goes, we kind of won this game in the first half, or had won it to that point. And he said it was disconcerting whenever you give this 11-point lead up, like in the first 3 minutes of the second half. He goes, and then all of a sudden we're down and we've kind of lost the game. Okay, at this point, he goes, but then we build the lead all the way back up to 9 again. And so it was nice to see our team have some resiliency and not get hit and then just kind of wobble and just not be heard from again. He goes, but then the frustrating thing is we ultimately lost it. So we kind of felt like we won it twice in the midst of a game and lost it twice in the midst of a game. And that game is probably a good sign. I feel like I've said more nice things about TCU in the last 48 hours than I feel like should be allowed. But I will say this about their basketball program from this standpoint. They didn't play particularly well, and they only made a couple of threes, and they kind of grinded. You could tell maybe they were a little flat and all that, but yet they still won. That's a sign of a good team, in my opinion, or it should be a positive sign for where they're going. And Coach Green and I were talking. I mean, TCU's basically one bucket away from basically doing exactly what you did last year when that was the Sweet 16. I mean, they were in San Diego when you were. They go to, I think, overtime with University of Arizona, and they had kind of beaten up Arizona for the bulk of that game, and Arizona made a late run and was able to survive that one. But if they make another bucket there at the end of that game, then they're moving on to the Sweet 16 as well. But they're the exact opposite of you in that they had pretty much everybody back from last year except for they added a player from Oklahoma State and they lost one player to Creighton. Other than that, everybody is back, whereas you've pretty much lost everybody with the exception of about 3 guys. So it's very different from that standpoint, but they should be good. They're very old. They should be good, and you should expect to be somewhat inconsistent because you're very young and inexperienced.
You're going to be in some tight situations late in games throughout this portion of the year. You saw, and I don't want to say a huge lead, but you saw a comfortable lead in some angles or in some aspects slip away. And, that's okay. Maybe take a different route, I guess, than 10 straight to help see that lead slip away. Like it's spaced out a little bit, going a run here, going a run there. But that 10 straight going the other way, Chris, was a little startling. So I don't know exactly how to tackle that as the Jayhawks come to town. But we'll talk about strategy for Mark Adams and the Red Raiders as they prepare for Bill Self in Kansas from United Supermarkets Arena. You got a home conference opener for one of the conference best home environments, I think clearly fair to say. So excited to get back at it from the USA, Chris. I know you are as well.
Yeah, you've won 29 in a row. That includes 12 straight Big 12 games you've won. But that streak is going to be put to the test tonight, man. I mean, for sure. And we'll talk about those Jayhawks here in a little bit.
That's coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head there now to get the latest on this week's slate of games. College hoops, NBA, whatever it might be. Bowl season rolling on. And, of course, the college football playoff culmination is just around the corner. You want the jump on all the angles, all the action, and all the angles on the action. And you'll get it there at BetOnline HQ for live betting, stats, and scores. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite events while keeping up with the teams you love. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about what the trends are looking like this week with BetOnline, where the game starts. Great to be back in the saddle with you on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network with Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan coming at you west of the 100th where it's really going down. Classic West Texas week so far, Chris. Beautiful weather. I mean, damn near hot for January 1st on New Year's Day. I hardly detected a breeze. Today, a portion of New Mexico blew into town and it's freezing. So I don't know what we've got coming up on the other side, but hey, we're getting acclimated back very quickly, right, to being back in the 806 after traveling out yonder, man. Glad to see you back from Houston safe and sound and now hitting that Big 12 basketball road trip.
Yeah, glad to be back to kind of a routine, like that, for many people, November and December are just a blur with holidays, and it's just like life gets really, really busy. And when you do what we do in the sports world, it's like, everything's happened at the same time and, you're traveling. But yeah, we'll get into a normal routine now. And now the Big 12 gauntlet is here from a basketball standpoint. It's 2023. I'm glad I don't write checks anymore. I'd screw the year up as I used to do when everybody took personal checks. We don't really do that anymore. But yeah, man, you kind of your first little home game here of the new year is kind of a bit of a doozy. Maybe the best team in the country. Maybe the best team in the country coming into the building tonight, man. I mean, and it's a bit scary.
I'd say so. Anytime Bill Self and as well-financed of a basketball team as Adidas can finance is rolling into your building, you better be laced up. And, man, I got to tell you, you're talking about the holiday schedule and you kind of get lost in this and that. And I know that these guys have been working to remain in kind of a routine, but you can't really mirror a Big 12 type routine. So I sort of wonder what maybe the vibe is like with Tech after you get the first one out of the way. The environment's not going to be like it was in Fort Worth, I can't imagine, except there will be loud people in red and black, but a lot more of them. But as you're sitting here under primetime lights, there's probably a little bit different vibe to that. So I'm kind of glad they got one under their belt, I guess, for better or worse in Fort Worth already.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to start somewhere. I mean, there's just not an easy place to play in this league, and there's really not anybody that you can expect to come into your building and you're like, okay, we can get right tonight. I mean, I would actually venture. I would actually say this to you. I think as good as the league was in football this year, I think the basketball version is better. And what I mean by that is the lower half of whatever it ends up being is going to be better nationally than the lower half was in football nationally. Okay. And there's going to be somebody that finishes 5-13. There's going to be somebody that finishes, with 4 conference wins and all that stuff. But I just think that it's really scary when you see what Iowa State did to Baylor right out of the gate and what you see what Kansas State did to West Virginia, because Kansas State was picked to finish dead last, and they're 1-0, and obviously Baylor was kind of thought to be an outside national title contender, and they start out 0-1, and Iowa State was picked in the lower half of the league, and they lose their best player to the University of Texas, and here they roll out when they just blew Baylor out. So it's just going to be tough, and I think here's what I'm prepared to say about Kansas. I think college basketball has been really weird to watch this year because everybody's got so many new pieces, and it's taking teams a while to kind of figure out who they are and to gel and all this crap that coaches say, which is all true. I think Kansas has figured it out much quicker than everybody else has. Okay, I think they figured it out much better than everybody else has, including a guy that I guess am I hear you saying you will boo Kevin McCullar this evening?
As full-throated as I would boo anyone else, I'm a 38-year-old family man now, Chris, so my booing has been impacted by that. But whenever the time is right, I'm in for a McCullar booing. Certainly, I think I won't be alone in that.
Yeah, I'm very curious how. I think more people will voice their displeasure. I do think there'll be some that will applaud or like kind of try to take the high road. I'm really fascinated to see how Kevin handles this because he'll kind of largely dictate by his actions or his play or just his body language how he will be received. And like, does he have bad blood? Is he spicy? I don't know. There'll be all kinds of dynamics that I'll be kind of paying attention to. He's fit in though. Great with them. Jalen Wilson for the Jayhawks is maybe playing as good as anybody in the country. He's averaging 21 and 9. And Grady Dick, their stud freshman, who's probably a one and done. He's averaging about 50% from the 3-point line, which is phenomenal. For somebody that's 6'8", and they've got DeJuan Harris. I mean, the list just goes on and on. They're absolutely loaded. This is the team that won the national championship this last year. They replaced Abaji. They replaced Braun. They replaced David McCormick. I mean, whatever, Remy Martin and all that. They're all gone, and yet they're right back here and probably better right now at this point in the season this year than they were at this point last year, which is crazy to say, but that's the reality of what you're dealing with here. So, yeah. So it's just going to be there's going to be certain things that you must do tonight that you just simply, it's a non-negotiable, and turning the ball over, hitting shots, stopping them in transition defense, or it's going to be a tough night.
Yeah, I got to admit, I was liking some of the trend lines as far as the turnover numbers have been for the team rolling into Big 12 play, and that was one of those really sore spots from that loss where you think about what you're facing in Game 2, being the Kansas Jayhawks. That's given me some chills. Very electrifying in all the wrong ways. Shout out to Danny Zuko, because I can only imagine, Chris, that Kansas has noticed this from Texas Tech, and there may be something there for the Jayhawks as far as meat on the bone. But you're back at the USA, and it's going to be a wild and Western environment, I'm sure, very quickly. 8 o'clock, got all day to get lubed up, plenty of time. It's like triple happy hours if you're working till 5, so there are no excuses for not getting in the USA and having that thing jumping, right? I'm sure it will be.
Yeah, and it's the crowd, like it has done so many times, it has to be a factor in this game tonight. It just has to be. I mean, they have to make and again, the team's got to do something to keep them involved, and you got to do some certain things to keep them engaged and involved and all that. But Kansas is just really good, bottom line. And I thought they kind of came out flat this past Saturday at home, and they were down double digits late in that game. And there was a shocker, but there was a call that went Kansas's way at the very, very end that was unfortunate for Oklahoma State. But I think they probably got a wake-up call right out of the gate. And, I'm sure that their coach has their attention and all those things. But, like here's what I want fans to watch tonight, though, is they get the ball up the floor like as quickly as anybody in the country, analytically, with the eyeball test, however you want to do it. As soon as there is a rebound that is gotten, that ball they're at the other free throw line in 2 to 3 seconds. It's crazy how well disciplined that they advance the ball. There's 4 different guys on their team that will lead the break. And it puts so much pressure and stress on your defense, because you have to decide how many guys do I want to send to the glass and try to rebound versus how many guys do I say, hey, you're not going for a rebound all night. You've got to get back and stop the ball, because if not, it's a layup or a three on the other end. And that's kind of the game within the game. But Kansas is as good as it. That's just who their identity is, and it scares you to death. And it's kind of so if you go in and you do turn it over poorly and like with a bad shot, or there's just some bad decision and there's just a live ball turnover, you're going to pay for it. I mean, the ball is going to be up the floor and going through the net, and you do that 3 or 4 times and you're down 8, kind of thing. That's what I'm saying. It's like the margin for error be very, very small for Texas Tech tonight, but they can compete. You just have to O'Banner will play better, and you just have to hit some shots.
No question about it. And if you can do anything to improve the TO or free throw columns, that'll go a long way in aiding in that effort. But this is what we're here for, is Big 12 basketball in prime time in Lubbock, Texas. So can't wait to get back to the USA and have the Jayhawks and Bill Self on the other bench, fitting the description of the next potential victim. All right, Chris, we'll have plenty to say about it, for better or worse, on the other side as we get back at it on Locked On Texas Tech. Thanks to those for joining us wherever, whenever, however you're making it a part of your day. We appreciate it. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't so far, so you never miss an episode coming at you each weekday. Chris, thanks for the time, man. Enjoy the ball game at the USA.
Yeah, it should be fun, man. I hope to see everybody out there. Thank you so much for listening. Happy 2023 to everybody. Keep hope alive. Onward and upward from here.
Yeah, here we come, 2024. With Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Maybe we'll just work on January 1st.
Yeah.
We'll see you on the other side on Locked On Texas Tech.